Do you remember when you were a kid and you'd say, I'll never do that? Well, one of the things I said I would never do was doubt the church. Well, 5 years ago, I had a faith crisis, and that faith crisis shook the foundations of my world. And what I'd like to do today is I'd like to share this story with you guys. I'd like to start off when I was a kid and then early church up until, you know, today. I'd like to talk about some of the top important things in my life that really formed me who I was, and kind of the big peaking moments of my faith crisis, my journey that I took through the faith crisis, the reasons why I didn't leave the church immediately, why I decided to stay when I could have left, and why I am currently taking a break from the church. And so I'm going to start from the beginning. I was born of goodly parents. I'm going to start that soon. I'll start actually when I was about 10, because being baptized at 8, by the age of 10, I really actually had my first experience that really pulled me into the church. That first experience was an experience of forgiveness. See, I was a very angry child, and I was prone to tantrums of rage, and in one of those tantrums, I severely injured a friend who turned around and forgave me, and that forgiveness changed me. I suddenly was not so angry. I could get over my anger instantly. That was very different for me. I was prone to allow my anger to control me, and suddenly anger had no control over me. And that forgiveness really helped me recognize the power that Christ had. And because of that, I became a very fervent member in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. As a young man, as I got older, I didn't necessarily keep all those good attributes, but I think I turned out all right. Now, as a preteen and teenager, I think the church was wonderful. I really loved Boy Scouts, the Young Men's Program. I really enjoyed the EFY, the youth spectaculars, the treks that I was able to go on. All those things were wonderful experiences that really helped me become a better person, and I am really grateful for all those opportunities that I had. There's one ultimate regret I have from my youth, and that is that I was kind of hiding a dark secret that I was battling depression and had some suicidal tendencies. And the reason for those was that, of course, when puberty hit and I started having those lovely puberty hormones coursing through my veins, and I discovered new sexual desires, I viewed myself very poorly. I felt like I was an abomination. I felt like I was a son of perdition that was destined for outer darkness. And because of those feelings, I felt like the only way that God could really forgive me is if I had blood atonement by taking my life. And that is a dark thought, and I'm glad that I never did that. But a good portion of my teenage years, I viewed myself very poorly, and I prayed many, many times for God to take away my abilities or take away my life. And I'm glad He didn't. I am enjoying being an old man. Okay, I'm not old, but I'm grateful that I made it past that. Other than those dark moments, youth was pretty great in the church for me. For my siblings, there were some times where they were pretty upset. Our ward was definitely cliquish. There were some cliques, and my family didn't fit into them the best. My family was definitely the first family you'd call if you had a service project. Not the first family you'd call if you had a party, though. And so um, that was fine with me. I really enjoyed serving. Service was a big part of my life growing up. I loved serving with my family. My parents were really awesome. I got a home teach with my father, and my father was very good about not missing home teaching. And so we were pretty steady home teachers. So that's one of the pleasures of growing up that I had right there as I took off for college. I originally was going to go to Boise State, but my best friend convinced me to go to BYU Idaho instead. So we packed up and went over to good old Rexburg. And in Rexburg, we had a great time when we our first semester there. It was great. Second semester, or that first year, then we took off on our missions, and that was a wonderful learning experience for me to be able to get out there and start learning things on our own and having those experiences. And I really have really fond memories of my first year at BYU Idaho, and I enjoyed it, so I was happy about going back. Though I was tempted after my mission to go back to Boise State instead, but ultimately I went back to Rexburg. Anyway, I got my mission call to Brazil, and I made it out to Brazil, and the mission was the best 2 years. It really was. I absolutely enjoyed my mission. Um, I've already mentioned, when I was younger, I kind of had those struggles right there. And one of the nice things about being a missionary is you're never left alone, so those are never problems. Well, they're still there, but it's not that big of a problem. And so I just felt like I was freed on my mission and I was able to just be myself and just serve God. And I was very head over heels over serving God. And so um, I was always about getting the work done and doing the work. Of course, we had a few pranks that we'd pull in there. One of my favorites is that we set up a shrine to Joseph Smith. And so when the new missionaries got into the area, we said, okay, before we head out to teach today, we have to say our prayers to Joseph. And then we prostrated ourselves in front of the shrine. Um, but you know, uh, but the pranks would never get in the way of the work. It was about getting out there and doing it. And I loved uh, the church, and so I was doing something for what I loved. Um, you know, I From my second area to the very end, I absolutely loved my mission. In my first area, there was definitely some struggles there, and I had some dark moments there. But I'm glad that I served my mission because it was a wonderful learning experience, and I absolutely love the people of Brazil. After my mission, I returned home and went back to Rexburg. I met my wife, and we dated for about a year before we got married. I thought I figured out what I was going to do with my life going into landscaping, but changed my mind at the very, very end and went into education instead. And I am an art teacher now. Now, in this journey to becoming an art teacher at BYU Idaho, I encountered a few things. Now, before my mission, I don't remember too much apostate stuff. I mean, there's like roommates looking at pornography and things like that, but like ultimately, it was hardly anything that was bad. But after my mission, I encountered a lot of crazy things and people doing things that I thought, what's wrong with you? Why would you do that? I remember lots of experiences just where I was flabbergasted at how people could just, I don't know, be at Rexburg and not believe in Jesus Christ. That was crazy to me. But During those experiences of meeting people, encountered a few things. So one of the things that I experienced while there is I had someone ask me about the gospel topics essays, and I was like, never heard of them, so I went and looked them up. I remember I couldn't find them at first, and I had to ask him how to find it, and he told me, oh, just search engine it and you'll get it. And I was like, oh, okay. So I search engined it and found it, and I read them, and I was like, I already know all these things. Now, you see, my family was an interesting family. My parents encouraged us to question stuff. I had the mantra of question everything. In fact, that little saying followed me straight into the the room, and I have a poster on my wall as a teacher that says question everything. And so that's just been one of the things I do in my life. And yeah, so questioning everything was normal to me. And whenever we had questions, we talked to our parents, and they'd share stuff with me. And one of the reasons that I never thought that I would have a faith crisis is because I grew up knowing all those things that most people have a faith crisis about. For example, when people would leave the church and they'd say, "Oh, I discovered that Joseph Smith had many wives. I can't do that." Or I found out about the blacks in the priesthood or the Book of Abraham. The thing is I grew up learning about those as a teenager. I knew about all those, and so I never thought I could have a faith crisis because I felt like I knew everything. I did not know everything. When I read the Gospel Topics essays, I discovered that I was actually familiar with quite a few of those arguments. Um, I don't necessarily, the only one that I wasn't really absolutely familiar with is the multiple accounts of Joseph Smith's first vision. And that was kind of bothersome to me, mostly because I just spent 2 years sharing the 1838 version, and I discovered I liked the 1832 version more. But that's life, you know. I figured the church has a reason for sharing the 1838 rather than 1832, but I thought that was a shame. Later on, I was studying one day. So one of my favorite places to study, I can't remember the name of the building. It's right in front of the football fields. Has these big glass windows. I love sitting there, especially when it's cold out and you can sit there and watch people building snowmen in the football field while you're up there studying. Anyway, but I remember I was up there studying one day, and one of the guys that was sitting on the same little spot as I was turned to me and asked, he's like, "Hey, are you familiar with Kate Keller?" You know, I was like, I don't know who that is. And he's like, "Oh, it's that lady that wants the priesthood." I was like, "Oh, yeah, they ordained women. Yeah, I know that. What about it?" He's like, "Oh, she just got excommunicated. What do you think about that?" And it was interesting, you know, sitting there talking about that and uh, thinking about what I thought about it. And ultimately, I was like, no, 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 priesthood's for the men, you know, motherhood's for women. I was pretty closed-minded on that at the time. And then he asked me if I was familiar with John Dehlin. I was like, I don't know who that is. And I was like, oh, he's a talk show host or whatever he said. And I was like, huh, interesting. So I look him up, check out his podcast, and I listened to a few of them. And I thought, wow, okay, cool. I actually kind of like what John Dehlin doing. And then he gets excommunicated, and I was kind of sad about that. It was like, you know, I really liked what he was doing. Allowing people to talk from both sides, I think, is a wonderful thing. And ultimately, I came to the conclusion that he probably got excommunicated because he was using the name Mormon in it. That's probably why. That was the conclusion I came up to, and kind of moved on, not really thinking much about it. After that, for a while, there was no real events that really sparked any thought on it much. There was, of course, a lot of different things I saw that I felt like were apostate at BYU Idaho, but other than that, I didn't really think about it much. One of the last things that happened to BYU Idaho that really upset me was when the church put out um, the policy against the children of those who are gay, and that really upset me. When it first came out, I complained to my wife, and then called my best friend and defended the church for him because he was upset too. And I could not allow him to know that I was upset as well. I had to let him know that the church couldn't be wrong here. But really, I was upset. I talked to one of my friends there at BYU Idaho who gave me a new perspective, so I wasn't as angry about it. But ultimately, that was one of the last things that happened at Rexburg before I left that really upset me. Um, that was one of the first times that I was evidently, like, one of the first times I was very against what the church had done. And I had to put that anger aside and say, it is what it is. I will support the church. And I moved on with my life. I took off from BYU Idaho and went out down to Vegas, and I did my student teaching. And so the beginning of 2016, I'm in Vegas, and it was awesome. We loved it. It was carefree. Absolutely loved my home teaching down there because there were some cool families we got to home teach, and my home teaching companion is actually related to someone I work with now, which is kind of cool. And so like had a lot of good experiences down there. Afterwards, I was trying to get a job back in Idaho, but ultimately Idaho's not really fond of art teachers. Imagine that. So I was not having the easiest time. My mother-in-law came in after church one day and she said, "We just had a great lesson about patriarchal blessings." I said, "Oh, well, tell me about it." She said, Well, um, she listed off a bunch of things they learned, and then she shared how we should all try to actively pursue to fulfill our patriarchal blessing. I said, well, that's an interesting concept. She said, well, yeah, see, the patriarchal blessing is basically your future. So if you actively pursue it, you will always make the right decision. And I said, oh, that's an interesting way of looking at it. I like that. Okay. So I said, let's look at my patriarchal blessing. So I opened it up, looked at it, and it said in there that I would find a career in the arts and provide for my family with it. And after reading it, I realized my destiny was not in Idaho. So I applied back down to Clark County School District, and within the hour, I had 6 job offers. And here I am again, back down in the good old desert. And so, other than the heat, we love it here, and we've loved the school. Now, when I first got started here, we of course went looking for a house. We found a place, and at the same time, I had the stresses of looking for a house, as I had the stresses of being a new teacher. Some of my teaching philosophy I discovered was not working out for me, and I was very stressed about it. And as I had all those stresses upon me, I was studying the Dead Sea Scrolls and just was so fascinated with how, amazing it was that these documents that are over 2,000 years old are so close to what we have and, so accurate. And I was just really enjoying it. And as I was reading that, we were on a family call talking about what we learned in General Conference that, October 2016 General Conference. And well, while we were talking, they made the comment saying, well, gee, you're reading the Dead Sea Scrolls. I wonder how that compares to the Joseph Smith translation. And that's when it suddenly hit me. It was like a bag of bricks was just thrown in my face. And I was like, oh, oh, hmm. I grappled with that over, you know, a while, just trying to understand it. And I remember searching and trying to understand, and I looked up, videos on it and just really studied it. And that's really what started my faith crisis right there. And it was painful to me because I was a very active, fervent, believing member, and suddenly that belief got shattered. And I believed in God so fervently, He was like my actual father kind of figure, you know. Um, I felt like He was someone that I could go and give a hug to, and suddenly He was gone, and that was hard. It was very hard for me. And when my faith crisis started, um, with all the stresses I had going on in my life and the sudden new stress of everything that I thought I knew was wrong, suddenly I just was crushed and I started getting sick. And, I've always been the person that when I'd get sick, I'd be sick for a few days and I'd be over it. No problem. And suddenly I'm getting sick and I can't get over it. And I've only had 2 other times in my life where I really got sick like that. One of them was in my first year of my mission, and the other was the first 2 months of me being married. Now, during both those times, I had severe allergies going on, and this time as well. So, just like the other 2 times, I kind of said, oh, well, it'll resolve itself. Not really realizing that I kind of resolved the issues back then. Um, I just kind of figured it would resolve itself. And the thing is with all those stresses, my body was reacting and it was exhibiting in a allergy like form. I tried changing my allergy medication, it wasn't helping, and I just kept getting worse and worse and worse. And finally, after about 6 months of me getting sicker and sicker and sicker, I finally gave in to my wife's pleas to me go to a doctor, and I started going to doctors. Ultimately, it took us well over a year of visiting doctors before we kind of figured out what was going on, and then a little bit longer after that till we really understood what was going on. Ultimately, the first thing we discovered is that I had a salicylic sensitivity that had started up around them. That is aspirin, if you're not familiar with it. And natural aspirin, salicylic acid, is found in all vegetables and fruits. Yeah. So, if you have a bad enough sensitivity, you are allergic to everything. Anyway, and so pretty much no matter what, I just got sick, and so that was a very interesting time trying to figure out what to do. We kind of limited my diet down to like 11 things that were extremely low on the salicylate list, and uh, was just eating that for a while. And though that kind of helped, I was still having other attacks that I couldn't figure out. They didn't seem to be related, which they weren't. And so it was very interesting going through that. My body got so sensitive that I would have these attacks, and the attacks were like asthma attacks, except for asthma medication didn't really help. And so that's what I started battling with during my faith crisis as well. So as my faith crisis progressed, I went through different phases. I set about stupid fly landing in my eyeball. Okay, so I set about it in a way that I felt was a very reasonable idea. I said, I will listen to debates of the best scholars. Any point they make that I don't understand, I'm going to research it. So I started doing that every day, and I dedicated anywhere between 3 to 8 hours every day after my faith crisis to studying because I needed to know. The thing that I felt was truth to me was suddenly taken away from me, and I just needed to know. And so I was studying a lot, and I would listen to these debates, whether they were Christian atheist debates or a specific theology debate or a debate on some scientific theory or whatever it was. I was just listening to debates, writing down what I didn't understand, researching it some more, trying to understand it. And I was just one thing after another, just constantly researching and trying to understand things. Got into a lot of different histories, just started researching history and religion and all that stuff. Now, religion has always been a very fascinating topic to me. I love religion. I always have. When I first moved to this town, I decided I'm going to go to like every church here. And so the first few months of me being here, I went to 4 churches in the area. One of them because a student invited me, and then another one because they towed my vehicle after my car broke down. And another one just because they were across the street. And so I've been going to all these different churches, and then suddenly I have a faith crisis, and I just stopped. I was like, I'm not going to church anywhere except for where I need to go, which was, of course, the LDS Church, because I hadn't told my wife. I didn't want her to know. While in BYU, Idaho, I had a friend who had a faith crisis, and the, their marriage ended. They got a divorce over it. And I couldn't understand why they would get divorced over it. I didn't understand it. But then I'm in the shoes of having a faith crisis, and I realized I can't tell, I can't talk, so I didn't talk to anyone. Um, as I'm studying, I still have this desire. I just need to talk to someone. I just needed to talk, and when we moved into our new house. We moved in December, and there was brand new to the ward. They're like, hey, we need a volunteer to help, you know, this brother go get his dialysis. And I volunteered, and so I started taking this brother to get his dialysis once a week. He had to go get his dialysis done twice a week, and I would take him one of those 2 times each week. And he was telling me that most people just drop him off and then come pick him up later. And he's like, I like it that you like to sit with me while I'm here. And I was like, oh well, I enjoy talking with you. And we would just talk, just to talk. And a lot of times we talked about religious thoughts and things like that. And we just talked about whatever, and I enjoyed it. And I realized maybe I could talk to him. So I decided I was going to talk to him. And I felt like I needed to talk to someone, and he was the one. Oh, hello, little spider dude. So I decided to talk to this good brother, and really gotten him back from a dialysis, and said next week when I take him, I'm going to talk. And that time never actually came, unfortunately, because his next dialysis, he went in and he died there on the machine that day. And I was heartbroken because it was 2 days before I was going to talk to him. I had done all this mental prep for the previous few days of getting ready to talk to him, and suddenly he was gone. And he was like my closest friend I had made when I got here. And so it was really hard for me. I just suddenly heartbroken that I just lost such a good friend. And so I decided I couldn't really talk to anyone, and I kept it quiet. So 2017 was pretty hard for me because in the beginning of the year, I was grappling with the reality of God, if He was even real, and I needed someone to talk to. When I went to go talk to Him, He died on me, and I just had no one to talk to, and I lost my God in that year. I started to recognize from a lot of studies that I didn't believe in God anymore and continued that direction. In the beginning of 2018, I was reading a passage from Misquoting Jesus by Bart Ehrman, and it made me stop and think. It was the idea that if Jesus were to say the things he said, he would have to be crazy, or he'd have to actually be, who he said he was, the Son of God. And um, that's kind of the premise of that theory, is that Jesus had to have been misquoted because there's no way he could have said the things that he said. It caused me to pause and think, I need to read the Bible. So I decided that summer I was going to bust out that Bible and I was going to read the whole thing, which I did. While reading it, I used the interlinear and a few other translations at the same time just to kind of see the differences. I didn't want to read it in the King James, and reading it that way, my eyes were open to recognize several things that really impressed me. Some of the things, such as the presence of a council within the scriptures, is pretty obvious. Something that, you know, only a few denominations believe. And the other thing was that the similarity of certain things with other religious texts, such as things from, you know, Babylonians, Akkadians, Sumerians, all that jazz. So, as I recognized that, I started to recognize certain things in it that really impressed upon my mind the nature of the book. And I realized that it does hold a tale that is very similar to a lot of other religious beliefs. And if you look at that tale, you start to recognize a story that is not far-fetched, but something that you can believe in, and is the tale of a history of a people that was taken out of many nations that had been divided, and that people's rise and fall following prophecies leading them up to a point where Christ is. And one of the things that drives me nuts when I listen to other commentators, for example, those who say, oh, the flood couldn't possibly exist. What really bothers me about that is when you have tons of different cultures relating this story of a great flood, it's probably because there was some sort of flood event, right? And yeah, sure, the idea of it covering the whole world, yeah, maybe that's not true. But when you have it being told in multiple cultures, that's a pretty good sign that something happened. If you were an investigator and you have your phone ring in your office and they're like, there's a murderous clown on Fifth Street. You're like, wow, that was kind of a weird call. And then you get another call and they're like, there's crazy ninjas attacking us on Fifth Street. You're like, oh, whoa, wow, there's ninjas? Where did these ninjas come from? And then suddenly you get another call and they're like, there's an elephant smashing a china shop on Fifth Street. Now, your immediate conclusion isn't going to be, okay, someone's just pranking us. Your conclusion is going to be, something's going on Fifth Street, right? So go check out Fifth Street. And that's something that really hit me as I was doing my studies, because I had studied so many different historical texts from different cultures, different religions, and I started recognizing a common thread in them, and that is something that pulled me back in. And ultimately, I returned to a belief in God. Um, in the fall of 2018, I decided I needed to talk to my wife. I couldn't keep it secret any longer. Now, of course, she knew something was going on. We were Sunday school teachers together, and she could recognize that I was struggling with a few different concepts. I tried telling her multiple times, but couldn't, you know, get myself brave enough to say anything about it. And one of the nice things about being a Sunday school teacher was that I decided as I was going through this faith crisis, hey, every time we teach a new topic in gospel principles, I'm going to really examine it, see what I actually think about it, so that I could examine it, teach it, and then think about what is to be learned from that and whether that's something that will hold in my life. There were some lessons that I just did not believe it and I did not want to teach it. Luckily, I was terribly sick at the time, and so if I ever felt like I really did not want to talk about something, I would just say, I am too sick to teach today, and I would stay home. So that's what I would do. But my wife knew that something was going on, and so she was reading the Book of Mormon every day with the kids, every day when I got home. She knew when I was going to get home, and she would be reading the Book of Mormon when I walked in the door. And so that's what she was doing to try to save me. And I decided I needed to talk to someone, so I grabbed one of the teachers at the school who's not LDS, and I said, I need to talk to you. And she goes, oh no, did you do something stupid? I was like, oh, not yet. And she's like, okay, let's talk. So we sat down and I told her, and she's like, well, I'm here to support you, whatever you need, you know. And about that same time, I walked in one day, and my wife's reading the Book of Mormon. I go in, I sit down, and not quite paying attention, but just enough where I'm hearing the words go in my ear, but not really paying attention to what they are. And then suddenly the words caught my attention, and the ones that caught my attention was Third Nephi. Oh no, Second Nephi 3:12. Especially as it says that there's the two sticks, the Bible and the Book of Mormon, and when they come together, they will be used to confound false doctrines and establish peace. And there's like 6 different points that it points out. But when that passage was read, it suddenly grabbed my attention. I suddenly was all in it all of a sudden. I was like, wait a second. That's it. That's how I can tell my wife. And so that's actually when I developed the Book of Mormon Scripture Challenge. And so, funny thing, it was October again, something about October. Anyway, so October of 2018, I started the Book of Mormon Scripture Challenge with my wife. We sat down and we read different passages, such as that passage that we read that night, um, that basically say you should use 2 or 3 witnesses, or the passage that says, you should prove my words to know that this is true. And I said, we need to do this. We need to prove the scripture is true by using proofs, right? And she was a little nervous at first, but after seeing that there's passages in the Bible, the Book of Mormon, and the Doctrine and Covenants that say to prove God, she was in. And so that's what we decided to do. We started the Book of Mormon Scripture Challenge. And so that's what we started. She basically started her faith crisis the end of 20, started her faith crisis by the end of October, maybe November, and come February of 2019, she turned to me and said, I'm done going to church. I don't want to go to church anymore. Now, my goal in telling her I sort of didn't want to go to church anymore, um, but once she decided that she left, I suddenly realized that I didn't want to leave. It was a strange feeling because I suddenly thought, well, I want to leave, but suddenly I don't want to leave. I want to stay. And so it was a very interesting moment where she said, I'm done. And so I continued going to the church as a non-traditional, not quite believing Mormon, and she was now inactive. She didn't want to go to church anymore, and I would take the boys and we'd go to church, and she would stay home. Sometimes I'd go to other churches and things like that during the time as well. And I started the Book of Mormon Scripture Challenge videos um, right after um, Christmas. Started the very 1st of January. And part of the reason why I decided to start is my illness tried to kill me. So the end of, oh, it was right in the middle of Christmas break. That's right. It was right in the middle of Christmas break. And I had one of my episodes. And my episodes kind of exhibit like asthma, but this one was pretty rough. And it was so bad that I was turning blue, and my wife got worried, loaded me in the vehicle, took the kids to the neighbors, and she ran me up to the hospital. Um, and so that was my close experience right there. They drugged me up so badly that I was cleared out, and I felt really good after that. And the drugs slowly wore off, and I was sick again within the month. But um, having gone through that experience, I realized, I really need to share what I've found. And so I started the Book of Mormon Scripture Challenge for this reason. I feel that those who are actively believing Latter-day Saints need to consider what is actually in the scriptures. The Book of Mormon and the Bible are actually very similar to each other. And they don't really teach, well, frankly, Mormonism. The beliefs that we hold, the doctrines that we hold in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints aren't found in the Book of Mormon and the Bible. They're not. And so the idea is we should look at what's really being taught in these books and then what we are teaching. And so the Book of Mormon Scripture Challenge goes to the Book of Mormon and the Bible, and it just teaches straight out of them. And so um, that's what they are there for, to encourage people to ask questions, to examine the church, and to see whether what is being taught in these two books needs to be believed. And so that's what I did. There was a bit of controversy when I first started it because, of course, some of our family members were not so approving, had some friends that had some choice words to share with me about it. They didn't feel that the Book of Mormon Scripture Challenge was very good. They felt like I was trying to teach false doctrines, things like that. They'd get after me for it. And I'm like, no, I'm just reading. I'm just sharing what is right here in the books. And they're like, no, you're trying to put words into the book. I'm like, no, I'm not. You're trying to twist it. No, I'm trying to just share what's in there. Um, and so it was very interesting while this was going on. So all throughout 2019, I'm making videos whenever I feel good. Kind of sometimes I'm getting sick, sometimes I'm feeling really good, so I record some videos. And then at the end of 2019, the church says prepare for next conference by getting ready to do the first vision. And so I got excited. I said, hey, you know what? This could actually be really good. I feel like this is going to be something good for the church. And so I decided to do some general conference prep videos. So starting with episode 32 of my Book of Mormon Scripture Challenge, I started right on the first vision. One of the things that got me excited about it was I actually went to the Church History Museum and I saw that they had put in an exhibit that shows the multiple accounts of the first vision. I was like, hey, the church is going to share this. This is exciting. This is going to be so cool. We're going to openly talk about this in conference. Oh boy, was I excited. And so I put together these videos. There's about 20 videos from episode 32 on where I'm focusing on, you know, gen general conferences prompt to prepare for the first vision. And when conference happened, I was highly disappointed. I was highly disappointed. You see, I was expecting the church to complain and say, "Hey, these are the multiple accounts. This is what we can learn," and talk them over. Instead, what I get is beginning with "Hey, these are all the accounts combined into one account," read as if it's really one of them, right? If you combine multiple things, you have to have one of them be the face of it, and the 1838 account is the face of it. After they read that, they never mentioned the 1832 account again. The 1832 and the 1838 accounts are different enough that there can be many points of theological discussion that can rise from it. And I was hoping to have those. I think it would be good for every member to talk about those. I think it's important for us to think about that. Why would Joseph Smith write the 1832 account if it wasn't to be talked about, right? And of course, it wasn't. It was a misdirect with great pompous to distract us from it. And I think it's a shame. General Conference really is just a show for those out there looking at the church for them to see an awesome organization. But the church really should be using that time to spread messages, to help the members out. And after seeing that, I feel like that's not what General Conference is about anymore. And so after that conference, it took about a month of me really studying it, looking over, thinking about what's going on for me to come to that conclusion. And I ultimately decided I'm done. I can't walk through these doors until the church is ready to fully embrace and talk about everything that it needs to talk about. And so I decided to walk out. And of course, this was in the middle of COVID, which means nobody was going to church, which means nobody saw me leave. Yeah, some protest that was. It's like holding a protest in a back alley where no one can see you. That's pretty much what I decided to do right there. Now, ultimately, everyone's going back to church now, and people are noticing that I'm not there. And I've had a few people come say, "Oh, we miss you at church." And I'm glad they have. It gives me an opportunity to talk. But whatever the case may be, I am currently in a position where I hope that the church can do something better for itself. Over the last, 5 years, I have been in the position of being a non-traditional member of the church. I haven't believed in the church for 5 years, but I have continued to go for a lot of that time because I think it's a good organization. I think it has so much opportunity to do good in the world, and I want it to, but I'm very discouraged with what I'm seeing right now. Now, obviously, when the church put out the gospel topics essays, it was just, in my opinion, to have something available for the members if they discovered that to those topics. Of course, there's the CES letter, which people were fighting, and it was destroying so many testimonies because people didn't know about them. When I read the CES letter back in 2015, I knew about everything in the CS letter except for two things. And so, of course, it didn't shake me. I said, "Oh, I know about these things." And so, for members that know, it doesn't shake them, even though honestly, it should. There's a lot of evidence in there that says, wait, we need to talk about this. And it's not talked about. And, I'm happy that the church put out the gospel topic essays and they put out the Joseph Smith paper and they've published the book called Saints. All these things are good because it's introducing to the members that the church is not perfect. This image of a perfect church that has been painted in so many minds can go away, and that's good. And I'm happy that that's happening. But for this church to really progress and to really do what it needs to do, it needs to actively make itself transparent, show the world what it really is, right? A movement that started during the Restorationist movement, where a restoration took place. There's many other groups that are restorations as well, and that's okay. There are lots of really good organizations that came from the Restoration movement. There are many really awesome restorationist movements. You've got the Seventh-day Adventists, the Jehovah's Witness, all those groups are restorationist movements. And you know what? They are awesome organizations. We should be proud to be one of them. And I think it would be okay for us to talk about that. But ultimately, it's kind of up to the leadership of the church how they approach it. If they want to appear as if we are the true restoration, that's fine. But you got to be able to talk about all of them. We got to talk about what's going on in the church. We need to be transparent. We need to be able to talk about things, and that's fine. This is a good organization that can do good for so many people. But we can't do it if we're hiding secrets. The bodies in the closet need to come out. Now, one of the tragedies that I feel is going on with this is that right now the church is trying to get all the information out there, but it's not actively talking about it. Conference would be the ideal place for it, to get up in conference and say, hey, those First Vision accounts, let's talk about all of them. Hey, you know about how Joseph Smith had all his wives? Let's talk about them. It would be awesome if we could talk about that in conference, because then you would have active approach of talking about these hard topics. Anytime there's a hard topic in the church, it should be talked about, you but it's not. It's swept off and hidden, and that's sad. What's going on right now is you have a lot of older people in the church who, when they discover these hard topics, they have faith crises. You know, if you are older and you think the church is perfect and suddenly discover it's not, it hurts, right? But if you're younger and you think the church is perfect and then you discover it's not, it doesn't hurt as bad because you're still developing the paradigms of your world. And so it's good for young people to learn it. And that's what the church is doing. They're teaching it in seminary now. In seminary, they learn about the multiple accounts of the first vision. They're learning about some of the other history things of the church that you normally don't learn about. And that's good that they're learning about it. And I'm excited that they are learning about it. I just wish that this was a conversation with the whole entire church rather than just the youth. And so ultimately, I hope that the church will learn that it needs to talk to everyone. And instead of trying to keep both parties happy by not talking about with the adults and talking about with the young kids, that they just talk about it. You know, it's like having a sliver. You got to pull that thing out, otherwise it's going to get infected. And right now, with the internet and all things available to us, everything hits the fan. Why are you waiting for it to hit the fan? Ah, anyway, so that is my feelings on the matter. Well, some of them anyway. I could go on for hours with my feelings, but then my story as well. And so I hope that if you've made it to this point to hear me ramble at the end, that you were able to understand who I am as a person and why I created the Book of Mormon Scripture Challenge. They weren't created so I could start some new fringe movement and be the leader of this new fringe movement. No, I put them out there to say, this is the way I interpret them. Let's have a conversation. And that's what I want. I want people to talk about it. Now, I realize that the Book of Mormon Scripture Challenge just happens to be the um, channel that nobody asked for, that nobody wanted, but you got it anyway. But this channel is for actively believing Latter-day Saints, and my goal is that they actually consider what's in it, because I feel like that's what the scriptures are actually teaching. Now, of course, maybe I'm crazy and interpreting wrong. That's a possibility. But I'll tell you this much. They definitely are not teaching what we're teaching in Sunday school. So please consider what is being taught. So
Um, you want to kill me fly. She fly, don't bother me. She fly, don't bother me. She fly, don't bother me. Cause I belong to somebody. Okay. I will get your brother too.